I think we'll go ahead and get started. And so, Barbara, welcome.
Yeah. So how I'm having, there we go. Sorry. I was having trouble stopping my share with all this technology. So good afternoon, whatever time zone you're in. It's delightful to see you and know that you're all here joining us today. And I'm so grateful to the Newport Beach Church for this amazing opportunity to get you all together and over the next several months for you all to have an opportunity to just think about things in your own lives, maybe from a slightly different perspective. I know that each of these presentations will be different in format and tone, and I want you all to feel free to, as Mike said, to put questions in the chat if you have them. There will also be time for questions and discussions at the end. I wanted you to know that I'm going to share just 4 slides and a video during this presentation, but the entire presentation is on a 25 slide deck that I will email to all of you after this. So you don't need to worry about if your mind wanders for a moment or if you wanted to write something down, you're going to get the whole thing in outline form on a slide deck after this presentation. So I'd like to dig right into my topic, and I thought it might be helpful if I shared with you what inspired me to choose this one. I have friends who are involved with an organization for young people, and one day someone asked them this question: what is it that allows some of your students to grow in thought and to progress more quickly than others? And their answer made me really stop and think. They said that it is the willingness to leave your story behind that allows some to progress more quickly than others. The willingness to leave your story behind. What does that mean and what difference might it make? So I'd like for each of you to take a moment to think about yourselves. What is your story? Maybe some of you have done things you regret, or maybe you struggle with an attraction to alcohol or drugs. Maybe you know your entire life plan and have it all figured out. Maybe you believe that your worth is exclusively in your athletic ability and that beyond that, you don't have a lot to offer. Maybe you believe that you will always struggle with your weight. Maybe you are popular and that can actually be a burden at times. Maybe you've been labeled a good girl or a bad boy. Do you struggle with mental health issues, anxiety, depression, stress? Do you think you don't fit in, or that you don't know how to connect to others, or that you aren't sure how you identify yourself? Take a moment with me to think about your story. Perhaps some of the things that you automatically accept about yourself as fact that might limit you. Every one of us has a story, a narrative that defines us, where we came from, what we're good at, what we failed at, what has happened to us, why we are the way we are, how we identify ourselves. Sometimes we create the narrative, and sometimes the narrative is created by others about us. Either way, our story is something that we pack up and carry with us every single day. That's the suitcase analogy. What are you putting in your suitcase? And we often do it without ever noticing that we are doing it. And yet, how we think about ourselves impacts and in many ways defines our experience. How we think about ourselves impacts and often defines our experience. So it's essential that we are aware and alert to how we're thinking about who we are. So I don't want to create the impression that our past, no matter what our past looks like, is something to be ashamed of or to hide. Our past human experience is just an opportunity to learn and to progress. So when I talk about leaving our story, I don't mean to hide or deny our story. I'm talking about being willing to create a new story every day based on God's facts about you. Sorry, Just wanting to be sure that all is well here. Okay. So let's think about some folks who successfully left their story behind. There's a guy named Zacchaeus in the Bible. And you know what? I am not going to worry about sharing this slide. It's a picture of Zacchaeus. He's up in a tree and he's talking to Jesus. I'm not going to worry about sharing the slide because it's too distracting to me. Zacchaeus was a tax collector. In those days, tax collectors were not liked because they had a reputation of always taking more than the right amount in taxes. And Zacchaeus was one of those guys. But he knew that Jesus was coming to town. And on that day, he was so eager to see Jesus, to begin to redefine his own story, Zacchaeus, that he climbed a tree because he was too short to see over the crowd. Well, Jesus saw him in this tree and said, Zacchaeus, bro, come on down, have lunch. And Zacchaeus had a couple of choices here, didn't he? He could have said, oh, you can't come to my house. You know, I'm a tax collector, but no one likes me. And you don't want to affiliate yourself with me, Jesus. But he didn't. He happily agreed. He left his old story behind. He left his reputation behind. He allowed himself to think about himself differently and to think about himself differently than others thought about him, right? He freed himself from his reputation. And that willingness allowed him to progress, to become not someone different, but to become who he had always been as God's child. So one more example from the Bible. Do you know the story of Martha and Mary, two sisters who were waiting to host Jesus? Mary was sitting by Jesus's feet, listening to him, while Martha was bustling about in the kitchen. She was cooking and cleaning and setting the table. And eventually Martha got really frustrated with this situation and came out and said, hey, can't you see how hard I'm working and Mary should be helping me? But Jesus wasn't buying it. And he was like, nope, Martha, Mary's got the right of it. She's putting first things first and she's listening to me. So Martha needed to really look at her story. I bet she thought she was the good girl. And yet that narrative, that false sense of responsibility that she was carrying was actually holding her back. Then there's Mary Baker Eddy, the woman who discovered and founded Christian Science. She married young and immediately got pregnant. Before she could give birth, her husband died. She was a single mother, shipped back to her parents in a day when women really didn't have any way to support themselves. So you can imagine in today's world where that might put you, right? Would that cause a little anxiety, maybe even some depression, stress? Why did all of this happen to me? She could have been asking. She was also not in good health. She was very frail. There were so many ways that Mrs. Eddy could have allowed her story to hold her back. But instead, she turned to the Bible. And through study and prayer, she not only left that human story behind, she soared to new heights, eventually becoming one of the most influential women of her time in the entire world. So now I'd like to bring us to the present day and talk about someone a little more contemporary. I have a friend who thought that she had it all figured out. And I asked her if she would be willing to share her experience with all of you, and she agreed. Her name is Kaya, and Kaya is a senior at Principia College. She wrote of her experience in this year's December 17th issue of the Christian Science Sentinel, which is a magazine that the Christian Science Publishing Society puts out. And I'll put a link to the article in the slides that I send you. Unfortunately, Kaya can't join us here in person today, but she recorded her experience so that she could share it with all of you. So the folks there at the church are going to play this video for us, and here's Kaya.
Hi, everybody. As Barbara said, my name is Kaya Equivally. Sorry I can't be live with you today, but thank you for being here and having a listen. When I was in high school and when I was approaching graduation, I thought I had my life figured out. I knew where I was going to go to school, what I was going to study, the whole nine yards. But when I moved in, I got pretty sick, and every time I would try to leave my dorm room, it felt as though I was getting sicker. Um, so I called my mom and a Christian Science practitioner, people I call when I need comfort and metaphysical support, among other things. But I just needed to sit with my thoughts and really listen. And I think that was one of the first times that I could really hear God. And I knew that it was an angel message when he told me that I needed to go home. But I didn't understand what that meant. I was very confused because this is what I told people I was going to do. This is what I told myself I was going to do. This is what my graduation cards said I was going to do and where I was going to be. And it was really hard for me to let go of this idea of now I need to not know what's going to happen. I need to not have a plan, which is what it felt like at the moment. But I had to let go of that. I had to let go of, what plan do I have for myself and what do other people think of me if I make this choice to leave what I said I was going to be doing to make room for God's plan for me. And so that was something that I had to leave behind, is the worrying about what other people were going to think of me if I made this choice, and what I thought of myself when I had to make that choice to leave what I thought I was going to do and make room for what God had planned for me. And when I did that and I took a semester off of school, I was visiting some friends in St. Louis. My mom is holding the camera right now, so it's funny because whenever I got to St. Louis, she said, "You're borrowing a friend's car. Why don't you appease me and go sit in on some classes at Principia College while you're up there, just because you're in the area?" I was like, fine, okay, whatever. And lo and behold, everything I felt I had been missing before, God had planned for me right here at Principia. And so I'm about to graduate now from Principia College in May, which is crazy. But as I'm approaching that, I'm thinking about the same thing in a different light now, because now I have plans, but I'm leaving so much space for God's plan for me, because I know ultimately that is what matters and that is what I need to listen to. So thank you for being here with me today and being with Barbara, and I hope you enjoyed.
Sweet Kaya. So I don't know, I hope you heard in that experience all of the things that she really had to leave behind, leave her story behind, and not worry about what other people were thinking about her, and have the courage really to do that, which enabled her to then really grow and progress. So I thought that was just a really fabulous experience of a current day person that I wanted to be sure to share with you. So now let's go back to all of you. What about you? Take a moment to think about 3 ways that you think about yourselves that might be limiting. How you identify who you are or how you behave. Are you shy, outgoing, awkward, goofy, popular, smart, poor test taker, organized, messy, disciplined, lazy? Take a moment, pick 3 things and write them down. You can write them down on your phone, however you want to do it. Right later, I'm going to ask you to return to them, but I'm going to give you just a few minutes to do that. So go ahead and do it. Okay. Now I'm going to shift a little bit to another way we can think about our stories. I'd like you to think about the last 3 things you posted to your story on social media. You can look at your phones, you can remind yourself, how are you telling your story in that way? How are you representing yourself? Your story has now become illustrated, graphic, live, and recorded for all your followers to see. Think about what that is saying about you. I am not preaching against social media. I use it, I enjoy it, but I also understand its role in how we define ourselves today, how we tell and publish our story. Does your social media self tell a true story about you? Or is it just a fictional story, an edited, filtered, augmented version of who you really are? Something to think about. There are an infinite number of things that we accept about ourselves and hold as true. And it is really important that we look at those things every day so that we are aware of what we are carrying with us, what is serving us well and contributing to our progress, and what isn't. Does that sound like too much to do and some hard work? I am not convinced that it has to be terribly hard or time consuming. So in the morning, instead of checking your Snapchat and your Insta feeds, both of which, by the way, have algorithms that reinforce the story that you're telling on social, instead, start with God and how He sees you. You can do this as you're getting ready for your day. Give some thought as to what God is seeing in you. Did He see Zacchaeus as a greedy, dishonest man? Did He see Martha as a self-righteous goody two-shoes? No. Our Father, Mother sees each idea, each one of you, as perfect, whole, mature, intelligent, satisfied, balanced, loving beings. That is what He sees in you. Accept that view of yourselves. And more than accepting it, claim it, own it, pack it in your backpack, and take it with you. That is what allows us to progress. We can take this one step further and also think about what story you are accepting or even helping to create about others. Do you contribute to the narrative that that girl is a bully or that kid is stupid? It's worth thinking about how your thinking impacts others. It can't, of course, really touch them, not their real God-given identity, but it sure can make it harder for them and for you to progress. So I don't want to leave that out of the mix. Sometimes I like to visualize things that allow me to do things more effectively. So for this, imagine that you're in the ocean. Some of you in the church might even be looking at the water. Imagine you're in the water and you've got both floats and weights. And if you're able to let go of the weights and see them sink to the bottom, you float upwards. So let's try this. All my life, I have thought that I am not athletic. I have plenty of evidence for that. I didn't make the cheerleading squad, 3 different tries. I didn't play team sports. I wasn't fast, etc. Just tacking on those weights, thinking into that story. But in recent years, I've discovered yoga. At first, my story kept me from trying. I'm not flexible, I'm not strong, I'm embarrassed. And yet, I really wanted to do it. So I prayed. I really thought about what I was accepting about myself. Were those things true? Is that how God saw me? How God created me? I didn't think it was, even though it was how I had identified myself for more than 50 years. I had to take those thoughts off, one at a time, and allow them to sink to the bottom of the ocean. I had to go to my first class. I had to go to my second class. And it didn't, and expect a different outcome. So it didn't happen overnight, But as I allowed a different outcome, I'm proud to say that I did my first headstand last January, and no one can stop me now. I am an athlete. So what happened there? How does this work? Can you see that our thoughts influence and really define our experience? So our thought about ourselves creates a certain experience, and this happens moment by moment, day by day, year by year. If we think of ourselves a certain way, we invite our experience to reflect that. And this is why it is essential to be aware of how you are thinking about and identifying yourself. And if you want your experience to improve, to be more harmonious, joyful, successful, and progressive, then start with how God is seeing you. Start with how God is seeing you. Here we are at the beginning of a new year, a new semester in school. It's a good time to take stock of your story, of what you're packing in your suitcase or backpack. What are you carrying with you that is hindering your progress? Look at your list of 3 things that you wrote down before, the 3 things that might be limiting you. Can you see how they might be holding you back? Can you think about how it might feel to float upward if you were to let those weights sink to the bottom of the ocean? So here's the next step. Next to each of those 3 things, write their opposite. So for example, in my yoga experience, I said I was weak, inflexible, and embarrassed. So the opposite of those things are that I have strength, that I am flexible, nimble, I have a right sense of movement, right action, and I have confidence. I also have trust in others' good, but they're not going to make fun of me, right? So my work was to see and understand that those are the only qualities that are part of me, not these others. So I let those float to the bottom of the ocean, and you start to zoom up, right? It's a 2-part process. So in Science and Health, with Key to the Scriptures, Mary Baker Eddy writes this question: what is man? And on this one, I actually am going to take a moment to share my screen because I would I lost it. I really would love for you to be able to see this quote. That's just not going to work for me. So I'm not doing it. Sorry. So I'll read you the quote.
What slide number is it, Barbara?
It will be the 3rd one, I believe.
The 3rd one? Okay.
Question, it's the quote starting question, what is man?
What is me?
The 3rd one from the presentation version. Can't get it. Well, I'll start reading it, and if it comes up, it comes up. Great.
Let me go ahead and get this up.
Kind of a long one, which is why I kind of wanted it on the screen so you can be reading it as I talk from it. So Mrs. Eddy asks, what is man? So I'm going to just dial back since we had this little technical thing, right? We're talking about getting rid of some qualities and claiming their opposite for yourself. Man is spiritual and perfect. And because he is spiritual, and man, of course, I should say, man is Mrs. Eddy's way of referring to all of us, no matter how we identify ourselves, right? So man is spiritual and perfect. And because he is spiritual and perfect, he must be so understood in Christian Science. I'm not going to read the whole quote. I'm going to read excerpts from it. Man is the compound idea of God, including all right ideas. No wrong ideas, just right ideas. Man is that which has no separate mind from God, and that which has not a single quality underived from deity. Not a single quality underived, which means doesn't come from deity, God. So every single quality that we possess, that you possess, comes from God and therefore must be good. So you can stop sharing now. Thank you. I love that phrase, not a single quality underived. It's a really powerful one. I work with it quite a bit when I am seeming to be struggling with some personal trait that isn't serving me well, right? Not possible. No separate mind from God, no quality underived from deity. Every single quality you have comes from God. So let's take another moment for you to write down the opposite qualities to the ones that you originally wrote, the weights and the floats. Take a few seconds and just think about what that opposite quality would be for you. Okay, so your homework after this talk is really to think a little bit more about those floats, those opposite good qualities that you just wrote, and about yourselves as the image and likeness of God. Good. Knowing that this is what is true about you right this very moment. You don't need to grow out of anything or wait for anything. It's true right now. Christian Science gives us an incredibly powerful way to understand the truth about ourselves and everyone around us, to understand our true God-created stories. When we're thinking and praying about these things, seeking to understand more about God and our relationship to Him, we are better able to discern, to understand what is our real God-given story, as opposed to what the world is trying to tell us. That's what Kaya did, right? She stopped, she listened. She really had to understand and come to accept God's plan, right? And not all the voices that she was hearing, including her own, about what her experience could and should look like. There are so many tools that you have to help you with this. There's Christian Science Sunday School is a great place to start, reading the weekly Bible lesson, Teen Connect in the Christian Science Sentinel. And by the way, I will, when you get the slides from this presentation, there will be a link in them to JSH Online, which is where you can access all articles from all of the Christian Science periodicals. And just so that you know, there is a student rate for that. That is very accessible. So I encourage you all to subscribe to JSH Online. It's an incredible resource for every age. There's Christian Science Camp, and of course there's Principia, a school and college that's founded on and embraces Christian Science, which I hold near and dear to my heart. So these are all resources you have access to. And if you don't know where or how to access any of these things, email Mike Mooslin, the host of this webinar, and he will get you connected. And again, in my slides, there will be Mike's email will be in there, so you know how to reach out to Mike. You are free to pack a suitcase, to pack your backpack with qualities that are progressive, healthy, intelligent, honest, creative, energetic, and loving. Every day you can pack your backpack, claim your identity as God's idea. Be alert to what you are accepting as true about who you are. Be alert to what you are publishing or posting about yourself. Mrs. Eddy writes, Jesus beheld in science the perfect man who appeared to him where sinning mortal man appears to mortals. In this perfect man, the Savior saw God's own likeness, and this correct view of man healed the sick. This is that was in this week's Bible lesson. This is such a powerful explanation of how it works. Jesus saw Zacchaeus' perfection. He saw Martha's ability to move beyond her busyness, and his view of them healed them of qualities that needed to fall away in order for them to progress. God sees you in all of your perfection and glory right this minute. You can do this for yourselves, and you can do this for others. It's powerful. So, as you pack things up tomorrow morning for school, pack a new story. Let a few weights fall to the bottom of the ocean and go up higher towards God's view of you. Thank you for your time today. You've each got an incredibly powerful and good story that is uniquely yours. So go tell it. Thanks so much.
Barbara, thank you. Do we have any questions on our chat room or any questions here in the room? So I can just start calling on you, right? Do we have any questions, Keeler?
Nothing at the moment.
Okay, well, I'll try to get this started. Barbara, that was excellent. This whole idea. I'm reminded of the line in the hymn that says, "Turn the page and rewrite the story." And you really explained that well. There's a term, and I'll ask Barbara if you could speak to this, and any of the attendees want to speak to it, that's fine too. We have a term in Christian Science, it's kind of an odd term and an old term, and hard to understand sometimes what it means. Animal magnetism. And simply put, animal means material and magnetism means attraction. So animal magnetism is material attraction. And I think we can all be guilty of being attracted to different material aspects of our life. Animal magnetism was once defined for me as two teenage boys, two seventh grade boys having a fist fight in middle school out on the field. And the other kids yelled, "Fight, fight." And they all ran out and formed a big circle around them, watching the fight. Now, the animal part of animal magnetism is the fight. The magnetism part of animal magnetism is the watching. And if you're in the fight, quit fighting. And if you're in the crowd, quit watching. So Barbara, I was going to ask you, how could we, what suggestions do you have to encourage all of us to quit watching, whether it's the fires in Southern California or the war in the Ukraine, or it's a fist fight out on the field in middle school? How do we defend ourselves against that kind of mesmeric, if you will, watching, that hypnotic state of having to turn that news on or having to watch something go on in school that you could change if a different approach to it?
Yeah, great question, Mike. I think for many of the folks joining us today, that takes place virtually on social media, right? And there's group chats, and some of them are really nasty and really exclusive. And the virtual fistfights, the bullying, and really seemingly pretty subtle ways in which I think people try to hurt other people on social media is quite something today. And so of course there's the easy answer, right, which is don't participate. But it is pretty mesmerizing. Social media, that it's built to mesmerize you. That is what it does, and it does it scientifically. There's an algorithm that mesmerizes us, right, and keeps us going, TikTok after TikTok after TikTok after TikTok, and it feeds you more, of course, of what you watch. So, as I say, I am not against social media, but it is about as magnetic and mesmerizing a tool as I have ever dealt with. And so I encourage everyone to be really, really alert to what you're watching on social media, what you're allowing into your thought, what you're allowing to become part of your algorithm, certainly what you're participating in, right? You can get out of the group chat. You can even have the moral courage to suggest a different way of talking about things in a group chat. And I know that's really challenging, but you can at least get out, right? And so I think for this group, that is one of the things that I would really, really want you all thinking about. And I think that's a great definition of animal magnetism, Mike. And I don't know until this very moment that I've put animal magnetism and social media kind of in the same place.
Yeah,
But I
exactly.
think it can serve a very good, it can be very good, but you have to be really alert. So,
Yeah, that's a great example. I mean, that's exactly the point. Um,
and it's always alertness, Mrs. Eddy calls it alertness to duty, right? And so it is that alertness. What am I watching? And oh my gosh, I thought I was going to watch TikTok for 2 minutes and half an hour's gone by. And what am I watching? So it takes a lot of alertness. So
I have a question here.
yeah.
Um, how can we help friends let go of unhealthy labels, baggage, without making them feel like we're disregarding their story, not listening to them, or not being compassionate with their struggles?
That's a great question. Um, for me, it's about pointing out the floats that are the opposites of their weights, right? So if you have a friend that's struggling with some negative self-image, find ways, think about what the opposite of that is, right? And find ways to be pointing that out in their experience when they are behaving in a way that is different than the story they're telling about themselves. Um, and I love the compassion in that question and the desire to not devalue anyone's story. I think, there's sympathy, right, that we can extend to our and compassion. But I'll tell you, a great story that I had, or a great experience I had once. I was a family member had what seemed to be just a series of really, really, really challenging things happen to them. And I was just feeling so badly for them. And to the point where I called a practitioner and said, I need some help with this. I just feel terrible. What should I be doing? And the practitioner's response was, don't get into the story with them. That is of no help to them. Right. So there's compassion for the story. I'm so sorry you're feeling that way. But there's also in your thought, even if you don't say it, in your thought, you're seeing what's true. You're seeing the true story. And what you think counts. There's actually a really good JSH article on that by Milton Simon. What you think counts and has an impact on even how others are seeing themselves. So I think there are gentle ways to do it and to be able to remind folks about an alternative story that they might be looking at. Great question. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Uh, I was once told by a practitioner, and the question really is, when should someone call a practitioner when they're struggling with some of the problems you're mentioning? But I was once told by a practitioner that I should step out of my story, that I'm not the hero of my story. God is the hero of my story. And instead of thinking about things revolving around me, uh, how do we revolve around God
Yeah.
and be more representative of godlike qualities And you mentioned that in the morning, think about what God sees in you. Maybe you could elaborate a little bit more on how to do that in the morning when you get up.
Yeah, I think everybody kind of finds their own way. Um, I spent years waking up in the morning and checking my bank account and entering my weight. Okay, so I'm being very vulnerable here, right? That is what I spent years doing because those two things were really important to me and part of my story and things that I worried about, things that I worried about. And so it came to me at some point in time that I was really starting in the wrong place. And so I became really disciplined about waking up and looking at and spending a little time with the Bible lesson. And even if there wasn't time to do that, really welcoming God into my day before I did some of these other things, and maybe only for a moment, right? You don't have to sit down necessarily and spend half an hour with this, but it could be as you're brushing your teeth. You decide every day when I'm brushing my teeth, I'm going to think about how God identifies me, right? As I'm eating my breakfast, however it works for you. Some people do it before they get out of bed. They say, before I put my feet on the floor, I'm going to think about my day, think about how God is seeing me, and really get that right. So I encourage each of you to think about a way that would work for you, that is a little different than the current morning routine that you have. Just make it practical, and it doesn't have to take forever. But I think it's really important to do. And it really turned things around for me, about what I was focusing on, what I was mesmerized by, right? Let those things float to the bottom of the ocean and your experience lifts.
What's the best age to think about starting to call a practitioner when you have a problem?
Oh gosh, I think you can be a little one, right, with your parents. I don't think there's an age that is too young to start working with a practitioner. Practitioners are awesome, awesome. So,
How
um,
would they go about selecting a practitioner?
so I think there's a couple of different ways you can think about that. If you are reading some of the articles in JSH, a lot of times practitioners are writing those articles, not always, but sometimes. There's also Spirit Watch, which is the Sentinel podcast, which is fabulous. And there are practitioners on there who are relating their experiences. And you might find you feel like you relate to an experience that someone is sharing, and you could do it that way. There is probably a local practitioner in your church, who you know personally, and that might be the most comfortable way to do it. Practitioners text, practitioners talk to you on the phone, practitioners can Zoom with you. There's a whole bunch of different ways in which to communicate with practitioners, and they love working with young people. So wouldn't hesitate.
How does the lesson sermon fit into all of this? And a lot of times, kids aren't always reading their lesson, or they don't have time, or they don't have their books marked, or they don't have a full text or whatever. But how can they easily access that lesson, and why is it important?
So lots of ways nowadays to access the Bible lesson, right? There's e-Bible lesson, which you can read online, and you can download it to your phone. There's the full text, which is printed. You can, of course, still mark your books. For those of you that go to camp in the summer, I think you get really used to doing your lesson every day. And what I hear from a lot of folks is that's awesome. And it sometimes goes away during the school year, right? So again, I think you need to know what's going to work for you. So what form would be the easiest for you? I think for many of you, it's probably on your phone, because then you can pull it up at any point in time during your day. And it doesn't always have to be a long study session, right? Every single every single citation in that Bible lesson has a truth in it that is healing, and that can help you in your day. And so I encourage you to do it in snippets. If you can't have time to sit down and do the whole thing, I think there's an infinite number of ways in which the weekly Bible lesson can help you. Even, on Mondays, it's a really, really wonderful thing to stick with the golden text. What is it? That's the theme of that week's Bible lesson, right? So what does that have to tell you? How can that impact your story for the week? So, it's a little bit like, for me, it's a little bit like working out, right? Sometimes you think it's not even worth doing if I can't spend an hour at it. Not true, right? If you can spend 10 minutes at it, it's going to make a difference in your day. And so I would feel free to make that format your own so that you're using it.
Yeah, it might even be just one sentence you carry with you to school and just hold to that sentence all day long. Any other questions for Barbara?
I think the only other I would add,
Got one.
oh, okay.
What do you pack on days when other people are not packing their bags well? When other people are bringing harmful?
Yeah, no, I heard it. So the question is, what do you pack on days when other people are packing the wrong things in their backpack? And I think on those days, you're thinking about how um, you are protected from other people's thoughts and harmful impulses, right? So, and how your love for them can be a really powerful protection. And not love for their behaviors or not love for the wrong things they have in their backpacks, but love for them as God's idea, right? And Mrs. Eddy has, says, clad in the panoply of love, right? So what does that mean? That means that you have on the armor of love. Human hatred cannot harm you. And so you have that armor on. That's what you pack in your backpack. You pack that armor of love for God's child, no matter what they seem to have in their own backpack. You can unsee that story about them. And that's a powerful tool that we have as Christian Scientists. So that would be my suggestion.
And Keeler, did we get all the chat room questions? What do we got? I think that's the original one.
So while you're looking, I'll just add to Mike's question about animal magnetism that the other thing that I think is very mesmerizing right now for all of you are these notions of mental health and how prevalent that claim seems to be today for all of you. And so again, it's this alertness. It's the alertness to what is society saying about this age group and the burdens that you carry, the world in which you've been raised, your digital natives, all of that, you guys, is part of what is being told about your narrative. The world is telling you this is your narrative, right? And that all of those things are going to cause anxiety, depression, and stress. And so I just want you alert. I want you alert to all of those things that the world is trying to put into your story. And you do not have to accept them. And in fact, you can actively let them float to the bottom and go up higher for God's view of you.
Barbara, thank you. Before we end the meeting, we have one more. Let's see, I hear a lot of parents telling their children stories. How can we tell our parents to stop telling our stories for us? Parents can seem to have a lot of opinions about their kids.
Yeah, I think that's that I think that's very true. And I think that as a parent, I know that it's a um, it's a discipline to constantly be seeing your child as God's child, right? Um, so a couple of things. I think, there's a way to respond to your parents that is um that's not the way I want to be seeing myself right now. I want to be seeing myself as God's child. That might bring them up short, right? And I think there's a way to enter into a dialogue. And I also think that there's a way to know that if what your parents seem to be seeing in you feels like it's weighing you down, you can know that anyone that's seeing negative, seemingly negative things, it can't touch you. It cannot touch your God-given identity. And other people's thoughts about you, believe it or not, do not have the power to begin to weigh you down if you're correctly identifying yourself really actively. That's some of the hardest work to do all your life long, right? And so that's a really good question, and I think something that many struggle with, um, and important to love your parents and know that they can be freed also from any false narrative about you or about themselves and their own parenting. So,
Thank you. And I'd like to remind everybody that there's a student discount for JSH Online, and Barbara will include that in her deck that she sends you. I think we also have it on our chat room, don't we? You can find it there. Thank you all for coming. Our next speaker series, Teen Talk, is with Sophie Hills. Sophie is a staff writer for the Christian Science Monitor, and she covers the White House, the Supreme Court, and I think Congress. And she's a wonderful young student of Christian Science. You might look up her articles in the JSH Online. And that talk is going to be March 9th, and the title of it is Can I Make a Difference? And so we'll look forward to seeing everybody back here on March 9th. And again, thank you all for coming. And Barbara, just sincere thanks for such a great message.
oh, my pleasure. And thanks everybody for your time. I really appreciate it.
Bye-bye, everyone. Have a great week, rest of your weekend.
Bye-bye.